County Council meeting. Today's April 23rd, 2013. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Barbara Brenner.
Here.
Sam Crawford.
Here.
Kathy Kershner.
Here.
Bill Knutzen.
Here.
Pete Kremen. Ken Man.
Here.
Carl Weimer.
Here.
Okay. Thank you. And will all of you please join and stand and join me in saluting the flag? All right, if you've got cell phones, will you please turn them off? And if you're going to be handing out any paperwork to the council tonight, if you could please leave a copy down here for our clerk for the public record, we would appreciate that. First thing on the agenda is to approve minutes. And we've got minutes from the Committee of the Whole for March 26, 2013, regular County Council for March 26, 2013, Board of Health for April 2nd, 2013, and regular County Council for April 9th, 2013. Is there a motion? Okay, Councilmember Brenner moves to approve minutes. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes pass 6-0. 6 with 1 absent. Is that how I say it? Okay. All right, tonight we have got 4 public hearings. Excuse me. So, audience members who have signed up at the back of the room prior to the beginning of our meeting will be called first and are asked to form a line behind the signs on either side of the chambers. If you were unable to sign up before the meeting, you will be given an opportunity to address the council once we've gone through the list. Each speaker will state his name for the record and will be given 3 minutes to address the council. Council staff will keep track of the time limits and let you know when you've got 30 seconds left to wrap up your comments. All right, so the first public hearing tonight is on ordinance amending ordinance 2012-048 in the matter of the adoption of the final budget of Whatcom County for the biennium 2013 and 2014 and restricting the expenditure of certain funds therein. And the replacement pages that we have were a pink one and a light blue one. So is the light blue one the most recent, or do we use both? Executive Lausch?
The light blue one's the most recent.
Okay.
Thank you. This is Executive Lausch, and yes, based on the conversation we had at the committee level today, as Brad Bennett and I, our finance director, came up with new language for the council to consider tonight, and I would like to introduce that, read that into the record, and then do just a brief overview of where we're at tonight and why the executive's office is asking for this. Through the budget cycle, we changed in the budget ordinance. We added a provision on Section 2, Item D. We added a comma which says that put in there if authorized by the county council. At that particular time, I was receptive to the motion that was made by Councilmember Brenner. I reserved the right to come back to the council if we felt that this was not a workable within the finance department. Today I came with a proposed ordinance change. It's a little bit different than this, but based on your comments, and what I'm asking for the council to consider tonight is in Section 2, Item D, is so that it reads, administration of the budget is the responsibility of the county executive, and therefore the county executive is authorized to manage county budgets. The county executive may transfer authority between departments within the general fund if authorized by the county council. And what I've changed from this afternoon is I pulled the language out pertaining to cost centers. And we got into somewhat of a discussion, and I asked our finance director to pull out the paperwork associated with cost center transactions. And this is what came across my desk in 2012 based on interdepartmental changes. A lot of these changes are from quite complicated to moving money from one fund to another. More appropriately, they come through in a fashion such as this, where we have money that are coming out of different source accounts and transferred into other accounts. So it's the shuffling of money between the line items that were within the departmental budgets is what we did. In 2012, we did not change any spending authority at the departmental level. Everything that we did was internal to the workings of the departments. Through our budget ordinance and through code, our budget is established as a total amount for the different departments. Underneath that, of course, are some restrictions that council retains as it relates to authorization of employee funding, but also it does allow for the executive to manage the day-to-day activities. So as a compromise to where we're at, and because I do understand that the council doesn't want to put me or any future administrations into give them the permission to make any wholesale changes in the middle of the year, I'm acceptable of having you retain the right to authorize the either increase or decrease of departmental funds. I really do think that it's appropriate, though, that I'd have the ability to work on these as they come forward, because this is quite a stack of paper. I can't say that when they come across, I read every one of them, but to get it to the point that they need to come to your desk, I think is a little bit burdensome. Brad, you have a stack of what's waiting for 2013, and it's about half this size right now. So what I'm asking for is the council to consider this amended language. I think that it's workable. It retains the control for you. It also alleviates the concerns of the other elected officials, because ultimately their budget is fixed unless it is changed by you. So that gives them the protection that they need under the RCW for their personal liability as it relates to maintaining their budgets. So with that, I'd looking forward to the public's comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions at the end of the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Executive Louse. All right, so we will open the public hearing, and on the list is Ellen Baker, Alice Whatcom, and it looks like Sandra Randall. So if you would like to line up, and Ellen Baker is first up, so come on up to the microphone, please.
Ellen Baker, Glacier. It's a very simple letter that I've presented. I will just read it as I wrote it. I was appalled to see Agenda Bill 2013-144 that suggests that the county executive should be authorized to transfer appropriation authority between departments of the general fund and cost centers within other county funds without authorization from county council. This is a bicameral government. You understand how the balance of power works in this county. To give up the power to control a purse would be to give up basically everything. I have been involved in lots of investigation and public records work over the years, and more trouble is caused by inappropriate transfers, overruns, misappropriation than anything else I've ever seen. So I think that the balance of power should be maintained as it is. If there's an accounting issue, I'm also an elected official. We manage our budgets. We're responsible for them. I do not think that this would be appropriate in any way, shape, or form, and council should reject it in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Alice. And if Sandra's here, or Sandra, if you could line up, please. Oh, okay.
I'm Alice Whatcom, and I would like to apologize. I thought I was signing up for the open period, and I do not have a comment here. Thank you.
I'll save your name for the open session. Okay, thanks. And so it looks like we've got another speaker lined up. Come on up, please. And anybody else that wishes to speak to us who didn't sign up can line up here in the aisle.
Karen Brown, Whatcom County. Ordinance AB 2013-144. Please don't approve this ordinance. Please leave the authority to the council to approve the transfer of funds between cost centers and new cost centers. The council is part of the check and balance system. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to address the council on this issue? Okay, seeing nobody else, I will close the public hearing. And what are the wishes of the council? Councilmember Crawford?
I'll move the ordinance as amended and presented tonight by the executive.
All right, Councilmember Brenner?
Well, I remember very clearly back in November when this happened, and we had already I made the motion to put this language in, and we had already changed it a little bit to reflect the daily small minor things that the executive has to do. Actually, my recollection of what the executive said was not that he would come back if it's not workable, but that he would come back if it isn't consistent with our charter. And it is consistent with the charter. We got a 2-paragraph explanation of this change, which basically said it's burdensome. And government's burdensome in all kinds of ways. I really feel that when it's burdensome to make sure we keep our check and balance, that's very appropriate. I don't think that, efficiency is everything that the public wants. I think they also want a check and a balance to make sure that that things don't happen intentionally or inadvertently. And it is about shuffling money, and I have a real problem with shuffling money without it coming back to the council. I really do understand that there are lots of little things. If you guys can come back with some language to cover those lots of little things, I would probably support it. But when you take out cost centers, you're taking out some of the great big shuffling that could happen too. And I can't support that. Let's see. You say it's internal. It's not between departments. It's internal shuffling. But we have some funds that are pretty broad, have lots of cost centers in them, pretty broad. And I could give an example, and if people want to argue about it, I will give an example. But there are some where it's very minor, and there are some where there's lots of stuff that could be moved around. And I feel like if this language, although it's better than what was initially proposed, is definitely lacking. That there can be major shuffles that happen without council authority, and I don't think that's right.
Councilmember Weimer?
I guess I think I'm in support of the proposal, the amended proposal, but I have a question, because since we've crossed out the part about cost centers within county funds, doesn't that take away your authority to be able to move that around? Or is that given to you somewhere else?
It is.
Well, it's not specifically prohibited, and because I have the ability to manage the rest of the budget as the administrative authority of Whatcom County, it's assumed that I do have the authority through finance, and is to make those changes.
Okay, then I support this.
Councilmember Mann?
I'm going to support it in its current form, and I think a lot of the comments that we heard in the public comment period were addressing the original proposal, because this one doesn't mention cost centers, and transferring appropriation authority between departments within the general fund now only occurs with authorization by the county council. So to me, this is a lot different than the original 2 versions that came before us, and I'm comfortable with this one. And one other thing I just wanted to point out was at our budget, our annual budget level, we don't even have cost centers as a layer of item that we discuss or vote on or whatever. So there's no, I don't need to oversee the cost center behavior within the funds. But the appropriation authority, absolutely, and I still see that we have that oversight, which is the most important thing.
Councilmember Brenner?
Well, I do want to give you the example then. There are some cost centers that are really small little things, but in the road fund, you've got new construction, you've got maintenance and operation, and if somebody wanted to shuffle money from new construction that we had authorized over to repaving another road, that could be done through moving it internally in the road fund. I don't want to see that. There are things that can happen that way. I don't want to see them happen.
I'd like a comment on that from the administration, actually, because if that's true, then that seems to be completely different than what I just said.
Well, obviously, we can't spend anything over the limits authorized by council as it relates to contracts. So the money gets transferred from one cost center to the other. There has to be a corresponding contract and council approval for the expenditure of that money. And so I think that it would be very difficult for the administration to go rogue on the dollars that we have. We have a tremendous amount of checks and balances, and the council has not only budget authority, they, with this, are going to have departmental authority, which you haven't had for years and years. This was something that was added into the budget at the end of the budget cycle. And as I said then, and as I say now, I have no problem with that. Actually, it makes my job a bit easier to be able to control some things. This is because, obviously, to get permission to do any year-end adjustments, we need to come to you to make that happen. But to take a wholesale approach that the administration has the ability to move hundreds and thousands of millions of dollars around and do with it what they want, I don't think is a plausible reality at all.
Councilmember Brenner?
I didn't say hundreds of thousands or millions. I think there's a level that's way lower than that I think is a lot of money. And this can be done. You were talking about you can't spend more without coming to us. But if you spend less, then we're not going to necessarily notice. And if it gets put into somewhere else because, somebody was wrong in the estimate and it's going to, be more difficult to get done, you could come back and tell us, well, we have the money to cover it. So, and that's happened before, not just with you, but with other executives who have said, we've got the money to cover it. We don't have the same close scrutiny to the budget on a daily basis that you have. And this isn't about trust. This isn't about what I think you would or wouldn't do. This is about us being a check and a balance, period. So I think we should leave it the way it is. Unless they come forward with, some better language. I don't think this is going to do it. It may cover part of it, but there's some big movements that could still happen.
Executive Laus, do you have an example of a transfer from one cost center to another cost center that you could give us so we have a better understanding of what it is we're missing by not reviewing those changes?
While he's doing that.
Councilmember Brenner's going to make a short statement.
I'm sure he can find plenty of minutia to give us that everybody's going to say, I don't want to deal with that. But it's not just the minutia.
Let's see. Here's one that was generated from the Sheriff's Department, 3/2 of 12, coming out of the source account 2900, 6320. For office and operating supplies for $11,621.62, and it was transferred down to within the Sheriff's Department to 2,965.10 small tools and equipment for $11,621.62. And if I wanted to remember this thing, it seems to me that this was a repair on a boat. And that's a year ago, and I think I seem to remember that particular one that was coming through. So that's the type of issues that we're doing is taking money within the sheriff's budget and being able to operationally keep him going day to day, keep the operation going, and shifting money between the different accounts to be able to promote the operations within that department. And that's one example. I see another one here.
Can you tell us
travel and education?
Generally what the dollar amounts are of those, and how high do they get, and is there an average? Is there...
How high could they get?
How high could they get?
Brad, would you want to answer that one?
Yeah.
It could be as high as a few $100,000 if the council approves a contract for a project, and we're taking it out of a reserve account and moving it into a project-based budget one. So it can go all over the boards.
Generally, they're pretty small. I mean, generally, there's been some change that generates a little bit of extra money in a cost center. Say a senior employee retires. It was budgeted at that employee's wage, and then there's a need someplace else, like a failing radio or some other, need. And what they do, instead of going and ask for a supplemental budget, which I think is going to be the default, we, encourage them to shuffle the money within their existing budget, so they're not always coming to ask for more money.
So when they set their budgets up at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the biennium, they've got money plugged into each of these cost centers. Or if they get a contract or they get some additional money throughout that biennium, they'll put it into a cost center.
Right.
And then is there ever kind of a reconciliation process at the end of the year or biennium where they've got a process that shows, okay, we budgeted this much for supplies, we only spent this much, and we budgeted this much for tools and we spent over, and that money came from supplies? Do we ever see that? I guess I'm...
Right. Okay, so, if you go through the mechanics of how we actually execute this budget, I mean, in the middle of the year prior to the biennial budget, they do a budget. So it's 6 months before the biennium starts. And then we get into the budget cycle. Things could have changed. Okay, so we start executing the budget. They want to do a purchase order. We actually drill down to the cost center and make sure it's in there, that they have a budget for doing it. And so that's kind of how we control executing the budget. Now what happens is things change and they have a need and they have something that's changed that they don't need the money, so they do transfers between the line items to try and accomplish their mission within the amount of money you have allocated to them. So that's kind of the mechanism. And really the budget control mechanism is, if they have a need and we check to make sure there's budget. If there's not budget there, they have to do a supplemental budget or find it somewhere else within their budget to meet that need.
Okay, thank you.
Here's an example of one that $205,000 was transferred on 4/12 of 11. And we have cost centers at that particular time had cost centers for the Northwest Economic EDI Administration, for the Northwest Economic Business Council, and for the Center for Economic Vitality. As you know, that the county, the city, and the port put the tri-funder arrangement together, and the port is the administrator of that money. So the $205,000 from a combination of those funds were transferred into a new cost center of $332212 for $205,000. So that's an internal transfer to meet the obligations of contracts that we've handled. The way the language was amended, and I'm sorry that I didn't have this all clear at the very late hour that the budget was approved in November, but we didn't have this all vetted through didn't have an opportunity to look at it through legal and so on and so forth. These are the items now that if we leave the cost centers into it are going to be coming to the council level for approval. So that's why we're asking to regain that authority that we had up until the end of last year and grant the administration the authority to be able to do those internal transfers, all based on the approval of the council's budget. And on the big items is they'll all got to be backed up by contract. So I think the checks and balances are there, and I'll stand by what I'm asking for here is to make the administration be able to efficiently do the business of running the day-to-day operations of the county as per the authorization of the Whatcom County Council as provided in the budget and within the checks and balances that are still within the budget ordinance.
Councilmember Brenner?
Well, it did happen last year. It happened because I accidentally found $1.5 million that got put where it wasn't supposed to be. So, I hear that a lot of it will be minutia. You guys may not want to look at it. I don't mind looking at minutia. But there will be stuff that will be significant, too. And I think now that we know things don't always work right, I think it's important that we have that ability to have that second look at it.
Is there any further discussion on the item? Councilmember Mann?
Ms. Brenner, what if they sent you a list quarterly or gave us a presentation quarterly of all the cost center adjustments that had been made? Would just having the information satisfy some of this oversight need as opposed to going through the process of a supplemental? Because I'm not interested in creating more paperwork and more paper shuffling for staff. I mean, we're inundated with paperwork as it is. I want them to be able to do their jobs, and I realize informing us is part of their job, but I don't want to overdo it. So what if there's a quarterly report with just a spreadsheet printed out of the cost center adjustments that are made?
I think that would be fine.
Wow. All right. What would that be feasible?
But that should
Finance
be part of
director
this.
says that's possible.
Well, but I wanted to say it in here, too.
You want to say it in the ordinance?
This will not include cost centers as long as the council gets a quarterly report on all movement within cost centers. How's that?
How about if we add a sentence that says the council will be given quarterly report on cost center transfers, period.
On all cost center transfers.
On all cost center transfers.
Okay.
How long do we have? Because we typically don't close the quarter out for about a month and a half after the quarter ends. So I don't want to be held up by.
We'll just say quarterly. We'll say quarterly report, and you decide when that happens. Just as long as it's 4 times a year. Does that make sense? So if your quarter ends March 31st, we would expect a quarterly report on that.
Brad says that we can give you reams of paper right when we run the quarterly report.
Okay, Brad.
Okay.
So
that would be fine.
Councilmember,
maybe you could send it digitally instead of
that's fine too.
Reams of paper.
I'll have the opportunity to question you guys on it to make sure that you understand it all and know where everything was moved. I'm happy
as long as we can question you too.
Not a problem at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe one copy for the council office and then send it digitally if you want. If you need to make a copy. If you don't need to make a copy, that's fine too. All right, any further discussion on this? Amended ordinance? Do we need to vote on the amendment?
Yeah, vote on the amendment.
Who made the original motion? Mr. Crawford did.
Councilmember Crawford did. Do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
What was the words? It was
the council
to receive a quarterly report.
The council will receive a quarterly report on all cost center transfers.
With great reluctance, since I'm not interested in them, but apparently someone is, so yes, I will accept that as a friendly amendment or modify my original motion to reflect that.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, this is an ordinance, so will the clerk please call the We had the public hearing. Yes, we did. I'm sorry. Please
Barbara
call the
Brenner?
roll.
Yes.
Sam Crawford,
Yes.
Kathy Kershner,
Yes.
Bill Knutzen,
Yes.
Ken Man,
Yes.
Carl Weimer.
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-0. Councilmember Kremen absent. Councilmember Brenner.
I just want to remind you all how reasonable I am.
That was impressive.
That was a nice
Thank
demonstration, Councilmember Brenner. There's no clapping in the audience.
Exhibit A.
Okay. Moving on to our second public hearing. This is an ordinance amending Whatcom County Code 2.27A, aquatic invasive species. And do we have a staff report? Mr. Brusky, did you want to briefly go over the ordinance that we're going to be considering tonight?
I'm encouraged by the spirit of cooperation we've got going on tonight.
Wait, don't good.
So I'll just basically go over those 4 points that I went over in this morning's Natural Resources Committee meeting of what is the main points of what are contained in this ordinance that you're considering tonight. Those 4 points are, number one, Lake Whatcom and Lake Samish will require inspections for aquatic invasive species and stickers during 2013 under the proposed ordinance. Number two, the ordinance will expand to require these inspections and stickers for all Whatcom water bodies in 2015. Number three, vessels requiring inspection is tied to the requirement to be registered by the state of Washington. So any boat that is required to be licensed in the state would require an inspection and a sticker. So this would exclude kayaks, canoes, and rowboats. It would exclude boats under 16 feet with a horsepower of the less than 10 horsepower motor. And it would exclude sailboats under 16 feet. Finally, the fourth main point included in here is that Public Works is directed to develop an expedited program for inspection and permitting for county residents by 2015. Again, that's perhaps something similar to the OSS self-certification or inspection program, possibly some sort of online system. We'd be working, of course, with the city and the Lake Whatcom Water and Sewer District to ensure we could find a good way to do this. The rationale behind this is that expanding this program countywide is obviously going to entail a very large administrative burden, so we're looking for a way to streamline that. That's also the rationale for tying the requirement to the boat licensing. So it'll be a much easier way to track and to hopefully minimize the administrative burden of the program. Those are the 4 main points in the ordinance. In the companion ordinance, which the hearing is next, is the modification of the unified fee schedule. And I'll just mention right now, before the public hearing, so everyone has heard it, the fees proposed for these inspections and stickers for this year are in the ordinance to match the city of Bellingham's, and that is $50 for an annual sticker and $20 for a day pass.
All right. Thank you very much. Is it a clarifying question?
It is. On the unified, I should have probably addressed this earlier, but on the unified fee schedule, after we've ran this program for a year, will we have another opportunity to
Councilmember Knutzen, we're going to have a public hearing on the aquatic invasive species, and then we're going to talk about the fee schedule. So can you save your questions for that? Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brusky. So people that have signed up for this are Ellen Baker. No, not Ellen Baker. Sorry. I'm on the wrong one. John Ellsworth, Wolfgang Shager, Betsy Brinson, Bethany Olson, Connie Williams, and Dan Dahlgren. Joe Boyd. If you want to line up, and you can come on up to the speaker, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yes, my name's Joan Ellsworth.
Joan, okay.
Joan. And I live at 156 Shallow Shore Road, the south end of Lake Samish. And I just wanted to let you know that I do support including Lake Samish in this ordinance because we do drink the water at Lake Samish. That is our only source of water for the residents that live around the lake. I think a lot of people don't realize that about Lake Samish. And the other reason is because I think there's concern. We have a new boat launch this year. We had a badly crumbling one for quite a number of years, and then the State Department of Fish and Wildlife upgraded. They're in the process of upgrading it right now. And so I think they would be concerned with additional boat traffic coming over to Lake Samish if the permitting was only done at Lake Whatcom. So we feel that, it's inevitable that these invasive species are going to be coming our direction. They've been moving across the country, and we want to be prepared before they get here. So I personally do support including Lake Samish in the ordinance.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker, please.
My name is Wolfgang Schlager, and with the fees, it may be possible that less boats come on Lake Whatcom. I think some people would be happy about it, but less boats means the inspection fee may go up in the next years. It will go up, and finally, only some privileged people can afford to launch a boat on Lake Whatcom. Other subject, not only the boats are the ones who bring these mussels. In Europe, in Eastern Europe especially, some very remote lakes, hardly any human contact, no boats, no fishing. The zebra mussel appeared there all of a sudden. So scientists found out that the waterfowl is to be blamed, especially the migrating species, in their thick, wet plumage. The larvae of the mussel can be transferred from one body of water to another. Waterfowl is known to carry fish spawn, to carry seeds of aquatic plants. So we can't do anything about it, but this, I think, should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Betsy Brinson, and my mailing address is 1811 C Street. I do agree with Councilman Crawford's comments this morning on the radio that this is not a very well thought out plan. I respectfully disagree that this isn't a plan to try to ban motorized watercraft from Lake Whatcom and now from Lake Samish as well. And I disagree because of a couple of reasons. First of all, the most portable boats are the kayaks, the canoes, and the sailboats that people trailer easily or put on the roofs of their cars, and they are the boats that are most likely to spend time in other bodies of water. So by exempting them, you're sending a very loud signal to me anyway that you aren't serious about the aquatic invasive species issue. Secondly, there's no exemption in this plan that's been put forth for boats that don't leave Lake Whatcom. I have a boat that was launched in Lake Whatcom in 1954, has been off exactly once for a new bottom, and has never, ever otherwise left this body of water. And you're not giving us an exemption for that. So again, it doesn't sound to me like this is about an inspection plan for boats that would be bringing in invasive species. It sounds like a tax on motorized watercraft. And I also share Wolfgang's concern about the fact that the fees are going to go up and up and up, because we already know that the fee that is planned here is not going to cover the cost of the inspection. And so obviously what's going to happen is that it's going to get again passed on to the boaters. And frankly, for those of us that use the lake frequently and pay waterfront tax, we are taxpayers already paying a large share of money for the pleasure of having the ability to use the lake. And you are adopting ordinances that are only going to decrease our value of our property. So I think this is not well planned out. I think it should be much better coordinated with whatever Bellingham is doing or not doing. And I ask that you not adopt this ordinance in haste.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Oh, no clapping in the audience, please. We respect everybody's right to express their opinion up here, and we don't allow clapping, outbursts, yelling, booing, hissing, laughing.
No laughing?
A little laughing. You can laugh. All right. Next speaker, please.
Not the next guy on your list.
Well, you're standing there, so you come on up. How about that, sir?
I'm Dan Dahlgren. I live on North Shore Road. I'm on the lake. In general, I think I can understand the objective of the ordinance. I really question what's going on here. If I understand correctly, we're going to start paying the fees this year, but we're not going to inspect for 2 more years. Maybe I misunderstand that, but that's what I understand, okay? In my view, the devil is in the details. What are you really going to inspect? And what's the inspector going to do? How's he going to, what tools does he have to inhibit transfer of bad things into the lake? Nobody wants bad things in the lake. Everybody understands that, okay? But I don't understand what he's really going to do. How's he going to deal with the internal cooling system on some boats, for example? And until you work out these details and the other kinds of things like Wolfgang referred to, I don't understand. It appears to me as if this is just another form of taxation, and I find that irritating, okay? In general, I'm opposed to the ordinance as I understand it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please. Come on up.
Joe Boyd. I live at 3534 Riley Street in Bellingham. I too think that this idea has been hastily planned, not well thought out at all. And I've worked with Public Works, and I have to say I paid my $50 and I've had my inspection, and I'd like to mention that too. But I also belong to an organization called Borderline Bass and Contenders. For the last 15 years, we have had a bass tournament, open bass tournament on opening day of fishing season. We have capped the limit of boats at 25. There are 19 spots at Lodell Donovan Park, so we fill that one easily. And I question why it has to be April 27th that this inspection is going to be taking place. We have about 5 boats from the county. The rest come from outside the area, from as far away as Olympia, and some from even Yakima that come there. We had to pay $94 to the state for the permit to hold this tournament. Other clubs also have paid state permits to hold this tournament. There's approximately 10 tournaments scheduled through October of this year with boats coming from all out of the state. We charge a $100 fee per boat to fish there. 80% of that fee goes back to the participants in the form of prize money. We keep 20%. So if we have 25 boats, we get $500 in our treasury. We have 2 open tournaments per year on Lake Whatcom. I was informed on March 11th about this $50, $20 fee. I immediately called Public Works. They shared my concern, said that they were working on coming up with I think they called it an event fee. But I have heard nothing since then. We have put our information on hold for 2.5 weeks. I have people calling me all the time wanting to know when the tournament's going to be starting. So we're getting the applications out now. But we have heard nothing, and we're looking at basically our fundraiser with at least 20 boats coming from out of the area from as far away as Olympia, and we haven't gotten a word as to what's going to happen. Now, according to Public Works, they say that they're going to be open
30 seconds, please.
September 30th. Well, excuse me, but fishing season runs through October 31st. And we pay $29.50 for a fishing license, and we've already put $94 in there. And by the way, we have to pay to park at Lake Terrell and Lake Samish. It costs $30 for a discovery pass just to park there now. I don't know if you've ever been to Lake Terrell in July.
Time.
It's about 6 feet deep. I'm finishing up. And it's full of weeds. You need a push pole to get through there. I think you need to
Thank you,
rethink
Joe.
that.
Thank you for your comments. All right, next speaker, please.
Greg Brown, Silent Lake, couldn't sign up. I'm actually going to speak to the second and third here and the introductory item from the flood control money district to fund this. So I will speak to them.
Well, because this is the public hearing for this item, we need to keep your comments there, but you can speak to those other items in the open session.
It's fine, but it all involves every one of them anyway. I don't know why they're not put together. But this is totally out of control, and this is an example itself, and does not have the joint agreement between the city and the county. This is a knee-jerk effort that will totally run out of control. I can't believe that this county would move ahead with this without understanding or accepting what they already know, what the real motives are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Wendy Harris. I'm really struggling with the fact that people are here complaining about spending $50, where in most communities you don't have the privilege of recreational boating on somebody's water supply. I'm going to reluctantly support this because I'm glad that we're doing something. We need to do something to protect our drinking water. I don't support it in full because it really doesn't do enough. It doesn't recognize that securing a safe supply of water is more important for our future, for our health, for our economic viability than recreational uses of a lake. And so I would like to see no boats on Lake Samish and Lake Whatcom. The other concern I have with this is that there's two things that really create risk of invasive species: recreational water activities and development and shoreline modification. I would like to see us be more aggressive in dealing with development and shoreline modification. A big gap in this proposal is seaplanes. How are we trying to inspect boats, and then seaplanes is a home inspection that you take 4 questions and pass. Very recently, the hearings examiner approved a seaplane dock on the Nooksack. There's something really wrong with this policy. The other problem I have is we're not addressing the fact that when you're dealing with a water body that's already infested, such as Lake Whatcom, having boats that are inspected, assuming that your inspection program is 100% successful and you're just going back and forth in the lake, creates greater risk of spreading the invasive species that are already there. Going from one end of Lake Whatcom to the other, you can carry some Asian clams and create the risk of new colonies being formed. And you can spread plant invasive species. I'm also concerned because we're dealing with preventing future infestation, and we're not dealing with current infestation. Where's a management and control plan? I think if the people of this county knew how much it was going to cost them to control the clams that are already in the lake, they would take a more serious look at this proposal and a closer look at whether it's appropriate to charge somebody $50 to recreate on our drinking water supply. So thank you for what you've done, but I'm really urging you to go much, much further in protecting our drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the council? All right. Seeing none, Oh, okay. Come on up.
There was a second sheet.
Oh, was there? Well, go ahead and speak. I don't have the second sheet, I don't believe.
Okay, I'm Bob Harriman. I'm with the Borderline Basin Contenders. I'm the legislative liaison between the club and bureaucracies and municipalities and so forth. As Joe, one of our club members, was trying to explain to you, there are several things that were not quite agreeable to this ordinance, and we do not think that the county is prepared, nor the city. In fact, I worked with the Department of Wildlife on legislation that went before Olympia, in fact, this session, and they were having a hard time passing their Invasive Species Act. And some of the things that was brought up by some of the other people, for instance, how are you going to cover a bilge area? How are you going to cover live and bait wells? How are you going to do water-cooled engines? How are you going to do anchor systems? For instance, my boat has 200 to 400 feet of anchor line. The slogan is clean, dry, or clean, drain, and dry. You have 400 feet of anchor rope. You just went to one body system, dropped the anchor. You come back in, go to the next lake, and same day or even a month later, it's pretty hard to dry that rope out. Okay, you carry that stuff wherever you're at. For instance, if I fish the Columbia River, put down 200 feet of anchor, come back up here, Lake Whatcom, where I live, and put down the anchor again, if you're trying to say I have to dry that whole entire boat out before I can enter that system, pretty difficult. In other words, you're saying you don't want me on the lake. Now, the water is not owned by the city of Bellingham. It's state water. It's owned by all the people in the state of Washington, not the city of Bellingham. It's not the only use here. And there's protection units that our club has worked on for many years. We file our permits. Part of those permit fees goes to take care of the habitat and so forth, the quality of lake. In fact, it was our club that turned in the bad items in that lake before even the investigations were put out by Western College. Now, the other thing that irritates me is we've been describing these problems all along, and the city would not take any adherence to it at all. Now, we pay fees for our fishing license. We pay fees, in fact, we pay a fee for aquatic species in our boat trailer licenses as it is right now. And what's being done with that money is being stored in a trust fund right now. Now, are you going to also charge for the same fee twice? The city's talking about charging. The county's talking about charging. This state is talking about charging. I thought it was against the law to charge for the same thing twice in the state of Washington. So, and then we have a discovery pass fee that allows us to park there. We have a department wildlife fee that we pay in our licenses that also puts an envelope on top of your dash to park there.
30 seconds, please.
So we are not in favor of this as it is standing right now. We think there needs to be much more looked at. And the amounts of fees, $50 and $20. I go to other states. In Arizona, it's $11. Okay? And in that state, they at least give a break to the senior citizens, and then they have an annual fee. 50 and 20 is outrageous. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so apparently there's another sheet that I don't have, so if anybody had signed up on it and I haven't read your name, please come up. Anybody else? Okay, seeing nobody else, I will close the public hearing. And what are the wishes of the council? Councilmember Weimer?
I'd move approval of the ordinance.
Councilmember Brenner?
I actually do believe in a fee system. I have to agree with whoever said this was very poorly done. Seems like we were so intent on keeping up with the city of Bellingham that we didn't cover a lot of the things that should have been covered. First of all, if somebody's only using their boat on Lake Whatcom and that's it, there should be a one-time charge, period. If in fact what we're trying to do is make sure that people are aware and keeping their boats clean and doing all that stuff, if we're trying to be punitive, yeah, why don't we just charge everybody all the time? But I don't think that's right if somebody's boat's not even leaving Lake Whatcom. Furthermore, we got information today that not only did we not have before, but the questions were asked before, and we didn't even get we were told different things. This thing about the clams that are there now versus, because of the clams, we got to worry about the zebra mussels. That one really has a lot to do with the other. Today, or maybe we got it in a thing from Joe, I don't know, this thing that the clams are very common. People commonly dump it out of an aquarium. It's a pretty common thing in an aquarium. Today I asked the question. I said, yeah, it is pretty common in an aquarium. And then I said, are zebra mussels common in an aquarium? No, they're not. So there was that. There was also the thing about, I know it was asked a number of times about waterfowl. And we were told, I don't know that we were exactly told, no, it can't happen, but we were told it's not likely. So that's something I don't know that we've even had answered. I want all boats checked, and I want it done by, you put them in different categories, how difficult it is to check them, rather than just hitting up the motorboats. I don't think that's right. But I also feel like if people, what I really want to see is what Chris said from Public Works, and I think that we should start that way instead of ending that way, because we hit people over the head with, and then we go back and try and do it right, and it takes people so long to start trusting us again. So I like the idea of the classes. I don't have a boat, but I'll take the class because I really want to learn more about this as a council member. But I feel like this really doesn't get at what we're trying to get at, and I can't support it the way, I can't support it the way it is. I think there were a lot of good suggestions, but I'm not going to support this the way it is.
Councilmember Knutzen.
Yeah, maybe this is better in the unified fee schedule, but we heard earlier today that that Bass Club's issues had been taken care of, and we heard in the public comment that they haven't. So I'm concerned that we might have got some wrong information this afternoon.
Yep. Okay, you cannot speak from the audience. I'm sorry.
Laurel Baldwin, Whatcom County Noxious Weed Board. As I understand it, the City of Bellingham offered to the tournament participants a $5 fee. I don't know the details of that or how that would work, but that is what I understand from the city for Blowdell.
Councilmember Brenner?
This isn't exactly what he said, just reminded me. I think when you've got a club, not only that has the history that this club has, but sent us this information from the Department of Fish and Wildlife that they have to fill out on aquatic invasive species decontamination report. These guys have been doing this for a long time. They're way ahead of most people probably in this county. And I feel like when they've already done this and paid through the state, when they can show this, they should be exempted too. I want to know, are we trying to solve a problem, or are we just trying to raise money? And this, to me, I had this great idea. I think we should work with this club and some of the others about setting up the classes and maybe doing it with them rather than us just doing it. They have proven themselves in Whatcom County over the years of all the environmental protection that they've helped deal with, especially in Lake Whatcom. So I think that we do owe a certain little bit of respect for the people who have done work and have a proven track record in this county.
Councilmember Crawford?
Yeah, I'll speak in favor of the motion. I notwithstanding the speculation, I guess is the best word for what could be wrong with this, and I've had those same thoughts myself. I think we're in a tough situation right now because of time, and it's the time of year that a program needs to be rolled out and staff needs to ramp up to it. And as I said earlier today, someone alluded to on the radio, I feel we're kind of cornered right now into doing a program that mirrors pretty much what the city is doing because we share, the two municipalities, the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County, share responsibility for the lake, and we need to work together on it. As I requested in committee today, it's my hope that when the joint Lake Whatcom group of both this council and the city council meet at the start, or hopefully early in the next year, in 2014, that we'll have one season behind us of this and have a real candid and productive discussion about how to make this program better and make it work for more folks. If I had my druthers at this point, I would prefer to see us require some level of licensing, thus reflecting an inspection regimen for the smaller craft. And as I also said this morning, I'm a little concerned, or somewhat concerned, it's not a huge amount of money, that we are subsidizing a program that's going to become a legacy program. And by that I mean it's going to incur an ongoing cost that will grow over time. I think Ms. Brinson's concerns about the fees going up are well-founded. I think that you're probably right. The thing I can't get past is that we've got a problem in the lake now. We can't deny that. That problem being Asian clams. The invasive species have been shown to be transferred, particularly these types of mollusks, on boats. I understand that fowl and other things can transfer them, but there's been a lot more specific evidence that I've seen anyway that boats are a primary mode of transportation. We are not the only municipality dealing with this. Most municipalities that are responsible for water quality in various lakes are having to deal with this at one level or another. So with my eyes open, acknowledging that this is not as refined as I'd like it to be, I don't think it's as inclusive as I'd like it to be. I'm going to support moving forward with it. I'm going to view the summer of 2013 as something of a test phase for a new program in which we're all going to cut our teeth a little bit on how a boat licensing program can work.
Councilmember
They support this as well. I think that they've kind of both the county and the city of Black Eye. I think what we're going to have is long lines, waits, and some frustrated folks this summer if they're required to get these inspections on a hot day. If it even takes 15 minutes per boat, you're looking at a 2-3 hour wait for some of these folks. So but I don't see very many other options on this, just because we do work with the city, and unfortunately I feel that they kind of rushed into this. I do agree with what most of Councilmember Crawford said, and I also would like to follow that up with, I'm going to make sure that staff follows through with that Bass Club's entry fees and make sure that that's handled.
Our staff doesn't know anything about it other than
they just made a comment about it.
They heard that the city was offering $5 off. I just wanted to clarify that our staff wasn't proposing that.
Councilmember Knutzen, you've got the floor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and so I would just be following up on that, and I would like to review this again next year in the Joint Lake Whatcom Policy Group.
Okay. Councilmember Mann?
I think it is important to acknowledge that this is a real threat. This isn't something we made up to keep boats off the lake, and I know that's a popular theory, but this is a real threat, and it would be irresponsible not to do anything about it. We spent last summer collecting data and doing surveys. This summer we're going to be implementing the program, and as has been pointed out, it's not perfect. We're going to refine it as we go. It's a work in progress, but we are going to begin the systematic inspection and see how it goes. And we can make changes. And the city didn't force us into this. I think it's definitely the responsible thing to do. A couple of points as far as expanding the program to include other smaller boats. I am fine with that. I do not like the perception that is out there that somehow we're punishing motorized watercraft. I sympathize with that, and I would be perfectly willing to revisit that issue to expand to other boats. And I am also not opposed to the idea that we might subsidize this inspection program. I don't think the fees have to cover the program. I realize there's a price-demand curve, and at a certain point we could just make it too expensive that nobody would want to get their boats inspected, and they go around the system or they go to other lakes. And on top of that, we subsidize all kinds of recreation. You know, whether it's trails that we build, or I like to mountain bike. I know that I don't pay a mountain biking fee. I think we, as a community, we create a framework of recreational opportunities, and I'm happy to spread the pain equally. So that is just for staff as much as the public's edification. I think we control what we control. If a bird can physically possibly bring a quagga mussel from Lake Mead, all right, that's unfortunate, but we don't really have a lot of control over that. But we do have control over the boats that come and go. And as Joe Boyd pointed out, there's going to be boats here this weekend from Olympia or maybe even Yakima. I mean, that could be right there. That could be the start of the next deposit of quagga mussels in Lake Whatcom. So I think we have to control what we can control, what's reasonable to control, and I am open to reevaluating the program next year to include more boats, and I would even support reducing the fee this year, maybe just cutting it in half off the bat, just until we include all of the boats.
Can I ask Chris Brusky a question? I asked earlier today about the progress that the state has made on a statewide inspection or a statewide program that would deal with this, and you had an update. I wanted to have you put it on the record.
I dug into that after our meeting today, and I did dig up the new legislation that was going through the current session, and it has passed both the House and the Senate, and it's apparently been sent to the governor now for his signature, and it looks like it had pretty broad support. In the Senate, it passed just last week, 95-1. So what it does is that it amends an existing program, RCW 7712-879, related to aquatic invasive species. Now, evidently, there's already, well, let me back up. There is already an aquatic invasive species account in the state treasury. I don't know the funding level that's in there right now. The existing RCW lays out several things that the department, being the Department of Fish and Wildlife, is supposed to do related to this, to develop, or the funds from this aquatic invasive species prevention account can be used to inspect recreational commercial watercraft, to educate law enforcement officers on inspection protocols, to evaluate the risks posed by recreational and commercial watercraft in spreading these species, to evaluate the risk posed by float planes, and finally to implement an aquatic invasive species early detection and rapid response plan. Now, that's all existing law already, and there's not a real comprehensive state program, even though that's already in the code. What's new in this legislation that was just sent to the governor is, number one, aquatic invasive species transport is now an infraction similar to, fishing with a barbed hook in a barbless area or any other fish and wildlife sort of infraction. So, entering Washington by road and transporting a recreational or commercial watercraft that has been used outside of Washington without meeting documentation requirements is now an infraction. Now, the documentation requirements are not specified in here. However, the Department of Fish and Wildlife is directed to develop and maintain rules to implement these documentation, including specifying allowable forms of documentation. So I believe the information that Councilmember Brenner gave me today would be similar to that, where, this is actually a decontamination report, and I'm guessing this is what they had in mind, that you would have gone through this checklist, for example, soaking your bilge, live well, other equipment exposed in either hot water or a 10% household bleach. There's a protocol where you go through various decontamination steps, which I think would address things like your anchor chain, your cooling system inside your motor. So that's where the state's going right now. So I guess the take-home message is there's a very large program on paper already that addresses this, but what has changed now is Fish and Wildlife will apparently be writing a WAC to relate to what is appropriate documentation.
That'll be interesting to see what kind of body of water you can soak your bilge in that's got bleach in it, since it's illegal to pollute bodies of water with bleach. But that's coming down the road, I guess. Not our problem, state's problem. Councilmember Brenner?
I think after a certain length of time, bleach kind of dissipates or something, but I wouldn't want it in the water. Everybody, 3 or 4 of you have already said, yeah, this isn't what I want, but yeah, and I'm open to this, or I want to change that, or but I'm going to support it. How about instead of supporting it, let's make the changes. Let's do amendments now. 2 weeks one way or another isn't going to make a big deal of difference. I want to make amendments.
Okay, what's your amendment?
I got plenty.
What's
There's
your
not
first
just one.
motion?
My first amendment is one-time only charge for any boat that is only on Lake Whatcom.
One time only meaning forever, or one
Unless
time
they
a
take
year?
it off the lake, yeah. Unless it goes somewhere on some other water body. As long as it stays on Lake Whatcom, which I know there are a number of them that don't go anywhere. And,
How do you enforce that, Councilmember Brenner?
well, you know what? How we're going to enforce it all? We're going to enforce it all by somebody, a sheriff's deputy or somebody driving around in a boat and stopping people, and that's how it's going to be enforced.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just asking how to implement it. How do
Well,
you
I
implement
think
it?
I would rather err a little on the side of trusting people than not. So I think, there's going to be a certain number of boats that are only on the lake. I don't even know that there'll be that many, but I just feel like it's not fair to charge them over and over again because we want money. The other one was, I think that when there's an organization, not just the
one at a time.
Oh, right.
So that's your motion.
That's my motion.
Okay, so restate your motion.
My motion is that there's be only a one-time charge on a boat that never leaves the lake.
Okay, is there any discussion on that?
Where is she putting that?
I guess you'd have to put it in 227A.050.
I'll let Chris decide where he wants to put it. He wrote this.
Okay. So are you ready to vote on Councilmember Brenner's first motion?
I would just prefer to have it in a certain. I would think it would be on page 176.
Councilmember Brenner, did you have a place you wanted to put that?
I would like it anywhere. So if you want it on 176, that's fine. Okay, yeah, you could have a 3 that says one-time only charge, D3. And that would be for boats that never leave the lake.
How about in E?
I just said D3.
Would you like to make a motion to allow the concept to go back to the Public Works Director to insert into the ordinance in the appropriate places?
I would. I'd like to do this and come back in 2 weeks with it. Otherwise, you know what? This hearing was really for show only if we're not going to respond to the things people brought up.
We're responding. You've got your motion.
I think 2 weeks, one way or another, is not going to, in the grand scheme of things, is not going to make a huge difference. So I would like to do this right, at least right as I see it. So
And
that's my motion.
So how many motions do you have?
2 off the bat. Do you want my second motion? I thought you
No,
just
not yet.
wanted
I just
to-
want to know if this is something that we should go through now or if you want to refer it to a committee. But we've got a motion. Does Public Works want to respond to how that would work?
I just had a bunch of stuff right now.
I think if you were to approve that motion, we'd probably want to go back and discuss how it would actually be implemented in committee. I'd have to think through in the enforcement issue. I don't know how you would document that a boat had never left Lake Whatcom. I think it might create quite a problem for the sheriff.
Okay. Councilmember Brenner?
Well, even with the inspection, they can't inspect the whole boat, so how do you document that there's not those critters still in there? I mean, at some point, there's got to be a little bit of trust. So if somebody, turns somebody in, because it's really not just on the lake, fine, but it just seems like we should start off with a bit of trust with people, and especially once I've seen what the state has somebody fill out anyway. I don't know what the answer is, but I really have a problem, not at least responding to some of these, I think, very reasonable requests we got tonight.
Councilmember Mann?
I'm not opposed to
You keep saying
your
you're not
idea.
opposed.
Well, because I'm not. Everybody, even if we approved your idea and had a magical way to implement it, that we knew would work, everyone would still have to pay that fee this year.
Right.
And I think all of us are contemplating that we're going to learn a lot this year about what works as enforcement and what doesn't, what kind of lines we have. Are we going to expand the program next year? We could, and also Mr. Knutzen just pointed out that the city's ordinance takes effect, I think, the 27th or the 28th, so that is why there's a little bit of a incentive to hurry. But since everyone would have to pay it this year anyway, you could still implement the program, and then if we decide we do want to grant immunity or exemption in perpetuity from boats that don't leave the lake, we could make that as part of our follow-up revisions later on.
Councilmember Brenner?
Well, there are 4 of you, majority of you are up for re-election this year. If, God forbid, none of you get re-elected, then you can say all you want, but it could be another council. I just feel like we need to show some cooperation with people who had some legitimate concerns. That's what a hearing is supposed to be about. I mean, I could end up supporting it if I get my motions, and I don't think they're unreasonable.
Councilmember Weimer?
I think Councilmember Man, stole my thunder because I was going to say the same thing, that everybody's going to have to pay this year. My other question probably for you is, can we amend this yet this year? So say we want to do this full-time exemption for people that don't take their boats off the lake. Can we come back in 2 weeks and make that amendment, even if we pass this evening? Because I think there's some reason to do this sooner than later. So I'd like to see this move forward, but I don't want to preclude that we can't change it at all between now and next year.
I don't believe there's a restriction. I see Dan here. Is there a restriction on how often you can amend an ordinance? Right. So,
what about throw that out?
There's apparently no restriction. So it would just be the standard 2 meeting process. The first meeting you would introduce.
Right. So it could take a month.
That's correct.
The soonest, right?
Yes.
So that would be my preference, because I don't think we have clear language or where it's going to go or how it's going to operate, and I don't feel like holding this up to try to draft that sitting up here this evening.
Councilmember Brenner?
Well, I don't feel like holding it up. That's something I want addressed, and I am not going to support it this evening, whatever, but I do have another amendment.
Okay, Councilmember Brenner, are you withdrawing your first motion?
No, I want to vote it on.
Okay, so all those in favor, anybody else want to say anything on Councilmember Brenner's first motion to amend? I'll say that I am supportive of Councilmember Weimer's idea of bringing it up with some more thoughtful discussion and make sure we don't miss something or put something in place that ends up being not the right decision and have long-term consequences that we didn't think of on the fly tonight. So, Councilmember Knutzen, did you have a comment or question?
Well, I'm just wondering how much of this would be addressed in the unified fee schedule.
Of Councilmember Brenner's amendment?
Right.
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah.
She wants to put language right here, so.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, that fails 5-1. Councilmember Brenner?
I think organizations that are legitimate organizations known to us that have for years worked with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and filled out these and paid their fees for this with the state, I would like to see an exemption for those events.
Okay, so Councilmember Brenner is moving to exempt organizations that we know that have paid a fee to the states for years
Not
from
just
this
paid
ordinance.
the fee, they filled out this. I mean,
filled
I
out
learned
the
a lot
form.
on just looking at this thing.
Councilmember Knutzen?
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I think that this needs to be a little more thought put into this, and then we could establish some sort of a group discount for events like we heard or proposed, where they could do a group inspection as well as which would be more efficient and save the program money, and also maybe give some sort of a discount for that. But I think there needs to be a little more thought in this than just doing something on the fly, and I am more prone to support this the way it is, and 2 weeks from now try to address some of these issues in a committee meeting during the day.
Okay, any further discussion on Councilmember Brenner's motion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. That motion fails 5-1. Councilmember Brenner.
I would like to see a fee schedule that is for all boats, not just for motorboats. And
is that in the fee ordinance?
That would have to be in the fee schedule. Yeah.
We're going to discuss that next.
Well, I am now.
I think that's on our agenda.
Unified fee schedule.
Yeah. So it's the next topic.
If
I could. Except it's in both.
Yeah, the ordinance that's before you right now specifies what watercraft are covered by the inspection program.
Okay. And I think it needs to be a graduated fee schedule depending on the difficulty of the inspection. But I do think that that all boats apparently have the potential, if they leave Lake Whatcom, to be causing the problem.
Is that something that we would discuss in more detail in a couple of weeks, Councilmember Brenner? Would you be comfortable with that, adding it to the other two items?
Well, why don't you pass this thing tonight as an emergency ordinance if you think it's that much of an emergency, instead of...
I don't think it's an emergency.
Well, the whole purpose of a hearing is for us to take information in and go over it and then come up with a final draft and then pass a final item.
So what is your motion?
That a graduated fee schedule for all boats depending on the difficulty with the inspection.
Okay, so Councilmember Brenner is moving that we have a graduated fee schedule for all boats depending on the difficulty of their inspection. Councilmember Brenner?
And I realize that isn't something that we could just... First of all, even if we pass something like all these things tonight, we'd have to have another hearing because these are significant changes. I'm just saying, unless this is an emergency, let's, or unless you're just not going to support anything I'm bringing up, and be easier if you just tell me now so I don't waste my time.
You're not wasting time. You're bringing up important issues. I'm just trying to run the meeting and have the motions made so that the council members and the audience can understand what we're doing. But it appears to me that you've got ideas, but you haven't actually thought through where they go in the ordinance or how some of these things would be implemented. And I think that a couple of council members have offered, the opportunity to come back and discuss these in more depth in a couple weeks or in the following months. And I think that's what we're working from. So no one's against you here, Councilmember Brenner. We're just trying to understand. Councilmember Brenner.
Well, the point is, usually when we have hearings, we get input, and the input gives us...
We've said this over and over.
I have the floor, by the way. And we do these things, and then we bring it back. Instead of passing something tonight...
We haven't passed anything tonight.
Well, it sounds like that's where it's heading. And I'm just saying, if you think it's that important, it should be done as an emergency ordinance.
Okay, so do we have a motion on the floor about charging all boats depending on their level of difficulty of inspection?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember
Mann?
I need to know more. Like, how much and how do you define difficulty and
This is why it needs to be in committee so we can do this. I do believe it needs to be in committee. We don't usually pass something and then put it in committee and change it in 2 weeks. We usually do it the other way around. We usually work on it after we've gotten the input and then bring some final draft back.
So you're offering these amendments based on the testimony that you heard tonight?
Yeah, quite a bit of it today and tonight. But I'm even willing. This is how. If this is important, I do think it's important that anything we can do to protect the lake is extremely important. I agree. Why don't we have some special meetings in the next week or so? Have a special council meeting. I don't care. Let's get it done in a week. I would do that. We could meet next week. We could work on this, put it in committee.
Councilmember Knutzen?
Yeah, My concern is that we should have dealt with this morning in Natural Resource Committee. And
I did bring some of this up, though.
And my other concern is that on April 27th, the city is going to start enforcing this, and our problem is going to be that we have boat launches in Whatcom County on Lake Whatcom, and we have boat launches in the city of Bellingham on Lake Whatcom. Are we going to have two different enforcements on different portions of the lake?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. We would not be doing any enforcement until we pass something. And I would rather try to get it better than it is the first time. I feel, okay, never mind. I don't want somebody saying we've already said that.
So your motion's on the floor?
Yeah.
All those in favor of Councilmember Brenner's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. That motion fails 5-1. And I'd like to move the discussion to the Lake Samish program. And we heard today in committee that our ordinance, okay, I'll let you, but I want to talk about that we heard that the Lake Samish program is included in the ordinance, and yet we're not going to be able to fully implement the inspection program at Lake Samish. And so boats that want to use Lake Samish will have to trailer up to Lake Whatcom to have an inspection. And I'm going to make a motion that we remove Lake Samish from this ordinance for this year until we can get a program in Lake Samish, so we're not inconveniencing and making angry people that show up and don't know they've got to go up to Lake Whatcom.